We are almost at Natlan, which means we'll be getting some new insight into the new characters and gameplay mechanics. This, of course, will include what the Pyro Archon's kit will look like, and what it will include. Before any leaks start to rise up, I wanted to get ahead of the game and design my own kit for her. So we'll be going through the usual list of talents, constellations, best builds, and best teams. Since she'll be a confirmed character in the future, I will not include a backstory like how I did in the previous character creator video. Still, I'm excited to share this concept, and we'll see how close my ideas are to the real deal. The Pyro Archon was first name-dropped as Murata, and this was during the Genshin webtoon comic. But since that time, centuries have passed, and it's very possible that the current Pyro Archon is no longer Murata. Still, for simplicity's sake, that's the name I'll be using for this video. Before we begin, I will quickly show all of my usual disclaimers, which you can read either through pausing or by checking it out in the description. Links to music and social media will also be there. But if you've read everything, let's begin. I'm actually going to talk about my design philosophy later on, so we can just jump straight into the kit. For Murata's weapon, I chose to give her a claymore. Being the god of war, she feels at home with any weapon type, so my choice is mainly because of headcanon. At the same time, we don't have an Archon with a claymore, so she's also got that going for her. She's going to scale with crit damage as her ascension stat, and this will actually play a role in her kit later on. For Murata's normal attacks, she does 5 swings with her claymore and fist. When she charge attacks, she'll swing her claymore consistently, and the final strike will cause her to throw it in a straight line, which can hit multiple enemies. Fun fact, I actually made this idea before Navia came out, so props to me for predicting that. Her plunging attack will be a single hit of AoE damage. All of these attacks deal physical damage by default. Note how I said default. Murata's skill will cause her to obtain the Igneous Wrecker effect. With this effect, she will have multiple traits depending on whether or not she's on field. When she's on field, her basic attacks will be infused with Pyro, which cannot be overridden. Additionally, the damage of her basic attacks will be increased. This is similar to how Wanderer and Yoimiya have higher multipliers after using their skill. Finally, she will gain resistance to interruption to avoid getting staggered. While off-field, a Carmine Meteor will fall from the sky every 2.5 seconds, dealing AoE Pyro damage. This will prioritize the enemy the active character is currently targeting. This skill is meant to have longer intervals, but will have much higher damage per hit. Hoyo kinda has a trend where Archons deal skill damage over time, so I thought I'd keep it consistent. This ability does not snapshot, so consider these factors in team building. Also, the meteors would be considered blunt damage, so hitting a frozen enemy would shatter, not melt. Both her on-field and off-field damage share a particle ICD of 2.5 seconds. For both scenarios, there is a 60% chance to generate a second particle, and this can help her be a battery for herself and her party. Archons are known to have full uptime on their skills. Murata is no different. Her duration lasts up to 25 seconds, but the cooldown is only 15 seconds. Depending on which damage form you take, your team will heavily differ, and we'll get into that later on. When Murata uses her burst, she will deal a massive strike of AoE Pyro damage. She will also briefly apply Pyro to herself and grant all party members with the Warcry effect. With Warcry, Murata will provide a flat attack bonus to all party members based on her base attack. This bonus will apply even when characters are off-field. Her burst has a 60 cost and a 15-second cooldown, but will have a duration of 18 seconds, allowing for 100% uptime. The burst explosion is a pretty high amount of front-loaded damage. It can be best compared to Diluc or Hu Tao's burst hits. Then, with the attack buff, you can serve as an alternative to Bennett. For Murata's A1 passive, we kept it pretty simple. When Warcry is active, every party member will gain a 20% physical damage bonus and a 15% elemental damage bonus based on their own elemental type. This effect works even if the character is off-field. Nothing too fancy, it basically provides extra damage to the party, which will adapt to the unit's element. And of course, the 20% physical bonus gives units like Eula and Femine some extra love. Murata's A4 passive will provide this effect. Every 1% of Murata's crit damage above 50% will increase the following traits: 0.4% pyro damage bonus, and Warcry's attack buff increased by an additional 0.2% of base attack to the active character. This bonus will cap upon reaching 200% bonus crit damage. Most of the Archons have an A4 that increases damage based on a particular stat. We haven't had a crit damage stat yet, so I figured it'd be a cool concept to look into. Murata's A4 effectively gives more pyro damage for her attacks, but it also increases her attack bonus by an additional amount based on her base attack. This extra attack only works on the active character, but like with Bennett's burst, snapshotting is possible. You might feel incentivized to go for more crit damage, but I still believe you should focus on her crit rate stat to have a decent ratio. To give you an idea of numbers, if she has an additional 100% crit damage, that equals 40% pyro damage bonus, and an additional 20% of her base attack going into the attack bonus for the active character. Now that I've covered her kit, I will now explain my design philosophy, discuss more about her playstyles, and how she compares to other characters. Murata is meant to be the embodiment of Pyro, so when designing her kit, I looked at how other Pyro users operated and incorporated it into her own kit. In this particular case, the idea with Pyro is centered around damage and the attack stat. Following the design of previous Archons, I wanted to make sure she had both a damage and support role. Many people want her to be an on-fielder, but seeing as most of our Pyro units are already on-fielders, I wanted to make her feel unique by giving her some off-field potential. This developed into making playstyle choice a major element to her kit. Depending on her field stance, she will still have an impact in battle, but she will have vastly different effects on how she deals that damage. I also wanted to maintain this idea. Choosing your playstyle shouldn't heavily affect your build, it'll only affect your team comps. She has 3 categories we can cover: on-field damage, off-field damage, and buffing. Let's begin with on-fielding. This is where a majority of the current damage dealers lie, and to be honest, Murata doesn't have anything incredibly special. At its core, this playstyle is just a power crept D-Luke. But let's be honest, D-Luke has been power crept for years now. She deals pyro-infused damage, which is good for either driving or triggering certain reactions. Her off-field playstyle is best compared to Xiangling. Others may argue that she could be a 5-star Xiangling, but that only stems from the fact that she would be the second pyro unit to actually deal significant off-field damage. Still, here are some notes of comparison. Xiangling hits faster than Murata, but Murata will deal more damage per hit. Both apply pyro with every hit, but since Xiangling hits faster, she applies it more frequently. In the right scenarios, however, Murata's slower application should open up an opportunity for forward melting, something Xiangling isn't really capable of. Finally, the buffing. While I would argue Murata isn't really a 5-star Xiangling, her attack buffing is definitely designed around being a 5-star Bennett. How exactly does Murata's attack buff compare to Bennett's? Well, here's the list. Bennett is single target while Murata is team-wide. Bennett is limited to a circle while Murata follows the active character around. Bennett is able to heal while Murata cannot. Despite both units having this attack buffing mechanic, there are cases in which you would choose one over the other. Murata operates as a dual buffer and damage dealer, while Bennett works as a buffer and healer. At the end of the day, what does your team comp require more? With that being said, in the same vein of there being comparisons and competition between these units, there's also room for synergy. It would be pretty normalized and even encouraged to play a duo like Murata with Xiangling for more overall pyro damage, or with Bennett for more attack buffing. You can play all 3 of them together in a mono pyro comp, and I can only imagine what the output of that team would be. We'll explore teams later. Next, we'll explore her constellations and how that'll affect her gameplay. Since I gave her a pretty interesting base kit, these are going to be slightly more basic, but hopefully still impactful. Here's Murata C1. For 18 seconds after Murata casts her burst, all the team's damage will be recorded as Flaming Fury. Upon casting her burst again, 1% of Flaming Fury will become a damage bonus for her burst's explosion damage. The recorded damage will be reset and will immediately start recording damage again. Murata's own burst damage will not contribute to Flaming Fury. This con is meant to give her more nuke potential, though it's nothing game-changing. Let's say in an 18-second rotation, your whole team does around 500,000 damage. That's a 5,000 base damage bonus to Murata's burst hit. As little as 5,000 may seem, just remember that it gets increased by damage percent, crit, and reaction bonuses. Also, Murata's C0 burst damage is already very high, so we're looking at a high base ceiling, low bonus scenario. At C2, when the active character deals damage and is below 70% HP, Murata will heal them based on 30% of her attack. Healing can occur once every 2 seconds. If that character deals damage while above 70%, they instead gain a 15% attack speed bonus for 5 seconds. There are a few games I played where dealing damage heals you, kind of like a lifesteal or adrenaline rush passive, so I wanted to put that to use in Murata's kit somewhere. This is just intended to give the active character a little bit more survivability, but in situations where you are taking too much damage, or if you're running Farina, this will not be enough healing to sustain the entire team. Ideally, you'd want to keep your team at high HP to grant them the attack speed bonus. C3 will just increase the skill level by 3. This will increase the multiplier bonus for her basic attacks and her skill damage, so regardless of playstyle, she'll deal more damage. At C4, I thought I would go with a Res Shred. When a party member deals pyro damage to an enemy, their pyro resistance is decreased by 20%. Having 3 or 4 Pyro units will increase that Pyro Res Shred to 30 or 40%. If a Pyro reaction is triggered, the corresponding elemental resistance is also decreased by 20%. Each individual elemental resistance shred will last for 5 seconds. More likely than not, you're going to have a team with different reactions, so triggering Pyro reactions will help the entire party deal more damage, but in the event you want to run a mono Pyro comp, then the resistance shred gets a higher buff to account for the lack of reactions. C5 will increase Murata's burst level by 3. This constellation is good for buffing the team's attack and also her explosion damage. C6 will unlock even more player options to choose from. If Murata holds her elemental skill instead of pressing it, she will activate an augmented version of her skill, in which her Carmine meteors will still strike down even if she's on field. If she is off field during this augmented state, Carmine meteors will strike down twice as fast. If her skill is on cooldown, holding the button will allow Murata to toggle between her normal and augmented skill. This is a relatively simple addition to her kit, but it comes with a couple nuanced effects. First of all, Murata's overall damage will be increased, since she'll be dealing Pyro basic attacks and elemental skill damage. While off-field, her meteors hit once every 1.25 seconds instead of 2.5. Her Pyro application will also become much faster as a result. Because of this, reverse vaping some of her hits might be harder since she might apply too much Pyro, but conversely, doing so may allow for certain forward vape comps to occur, so she can be a driver instead of a trigger. This is mainly why I made the Constellation have some form of a toggle option. The upgraded skill has potentially negative consequences for some teams, and I don't want to have a Bennett C6 issue. Effectively, if you want or are fine with more Pyro application, use the augmented variant. It will still provide more damage overall. But if you want to run a team comp that requires less Pyro application, stick to her normal version. Oh, and as I said before, her particle generation has a 2.5 second ICD, so there's no changes to her energy generation. This constellation changes only her damage and Pyro application. Now let's talk about artifact builds. For her best stats, I would usually recommend an attack, Pyro damage, and crit circlet. Crit damage is what you might lean towards, but her crit rate is still very important for consistent damage output, so you should still focus on maintaining a good ratio. You can also use an attack goblet instead, but I do have a reason for recommending Pyro damage, which I'll get into later. For her sands, ER can help if you need to burst on rotation, but I would recommend finding that stat in her substats. For sets, if you choose to on-field her, a 4-piece Shimenawa can work, but your energy requirements will get bumped up. 4-piece Echoes is a good option too, but it's ping reliant, so it won't work on everyone. 4-piece Gladiator works if you have good pieces lying around, and if you're running Farina or are in a situation where HP fluctuates, Marochase will be excellent. For an off-field playstyle, Golden Troop will be good since it will heavily buff off-field skill damage. If you're looking for a good general set for both playstyles, Crimson Witch is your best bet, but Murata can't make full use of the full effect due to her long cooldown. Lava Walker works in Mono Pyro, and Gilded Dreams can be a good option for Vaporize or Melt comps. Finally, 2 pieces of any of the aforementioned sets can work for a temporary build. Since she's the Archon, I wanted to take it a step further and make my own artifact set for her, since every new region comes with a specialized set that synergizes well with the Archon. We're going to call this one the Roaring Dragon Scale set. It has a 2-piece bonus granting a 12% crit rate bonus. This is already a good option for any of those 2-piece combos. For its 4-piece, it will increase the user's attack percent by 10% of their Pyro damage bonus upon dealing a crit hit. This effect stacks up to 4 times and can be triggered off-field. If a stack is not gained within 8 seconds, only 1 stack will be lost. This set will hopefully be Murata's best set. She'll likely be using a Pyro damage goblet, as well as having her A4 passive grant increased Pyro damage. Crit hits will be very important to trigger the passive, which she should have no trouble doing. Uptime is generally very good, so if you find it hard to land crit hits, you won't lose all of your stacks in one go. With artifacts out of the way, we can talk about her best weapons. For 5-star options, Wolf's Gravestone will be a great choice, though with her already insane attack buffing, this might start to overstack the stat. Beacon of the Reed Sea is a very nice option with its crit stat, but it's very hard to get both effects to trigger. Dealing skill damage requires her to be off-field, but in order to take damage she needs to be on-field. Skyward Pride is good if you need the extra ER to burst every rotation. It also has a higher base attack to help with her burst. Interestingly, Song of Broken Pines is also great. Despite having physical bonus as its substat, it has the highest base attack overall, and its passive will grant Murata attack percent and attack speed. 4-star options with a higher base attack can work well with increasing her team's attack buff. Talking Stick, Ultimate Overlord, or Prototype Archaic are some good examples. but she can still make do with 510 base attack weapons, like Serpent Spine, Blacklift Slasher, or Tidal Shadow. Of course, as always, I wanted to make a weapon concept that would be her signature. The name is Crater Creator, and it will have a 674 base attack with a crit rate substat of 22.1%. Its passive will increase crit damage by 16 to 32%. If the user is on field, they gain a 32 to 64% basic attack bonus. If they are off field, they increase skill damage by 48 to 96%. I know it's not as intricate or niche as my usual weapon concepts, but Murata's kit doesn't really need that. If she's on field, she'll only deal basic attack damage. If she's off field, she only deals skill damage. Its 674 base attack allows her to provide more attack bonus to her team, the crit rate substat gives more balance to her ratio, and it even adds an extra crit damage bonus which will synergize with her A4 passive. Oh, and if you care, the weapon design is a red hot battle axe. Finally, we will discuss her team comps and her role in the party. The main gist is that Murata can essentially replace either Bennett or Xiangling. If any team comp can use one of these two, it will work with Murata. But she has a couple more team comps that she will fit in. Let's just go down the archetypes. Vaporized comps will depend on whether you're doing reverse or forward vapes. Reverse is the easiest. All you need is a fast hydro applicator, which is usually Xingqiu or Yelan. An animo unit will work well as VV shredding and additional application. For forward vaporized comps, you'd want more pyro application for someone like Farina to vaporize. You'd want to use Murata on field to drive the pyro aura, and if you need to, run another pyro user to help maintain that aura. Meld teams run in kind of the opposite playstyle. Reverse meld comms can utilize an on-field playstyle to drive pyro for your cryo users to melt. It's possible to run forward meld on field, but it's much harder to pull off. Having her off-field will reduce her pyro application, providing more opportunities to forward melt, given your cryo users can't apply enough of an aura. Mono pyro comms work very well on her. You'd likely have her for on-field DPS, Xiangling for off-field DPS, Bennett for healing and buffing, and an animo unit for VV. Off-field Murata works with on-fielders like Klee or Linny, and she'll be providing additional off-field damage for your team. In overload comms, you'd have a much better output with Chevres. Murata can provide consistent pyro application, and she'll be a good DPS unit regardless of her field state. An example on-field team might be her, Yai, Chev, and Fischl. Off-field, we can look at a hypercarry comp like Raiden, Murata, Chev, and Sara. A lot of people considered a Bertrand comp for Dea when she first released, since her skill field only hits once every 2.5 seconds. The issue is that it's pretty slow pyro application, so bloom cores would stack up too much and lose damage potential. This issue would also apply to Murata unless you offer it C6, but it's still a viable option if you want to blow up the cores. Finally, burning teams. Simply put, it works, but since burning is a pretty weak reaction, you're likely going for something like burn melt. Since Murata provides consistent pyro application, you wouldn't have to worry about maintaining a pyro aura, especially if you can maintain Dendro on the enemy. Alright, that'll do it for the video. If you enjoyed, consider leaving a like and subscribing to support the channel. Let me know in the comments what you liked about the kit and what you would change. I'd also love to hear your own ideas about how you would design the Pyro Archon's kit. Alright, I'll see you all next time. Bye!